Welcome back in the audience and online. Welcome back at Politico's AI and Tech Summit. I'm Peter Haak. I'm a senior technology reporter at Politico. I'm grateful to see that the room is so packed for the next session, because the next 45 minutes we're going to speak about one of the most tense debates here in Brussels, and that's whether the EU should focus on its status of the super tech and AI regulator and make sure that AI is safe and secure, or rather that the EU should join the global AI race and focus on innovation and try to win this AI race. A very exciting debate with these four esteemed speakers. I will introduce them in a bit. But first, I want to point out to the audience here present that this is a panel where you can ask questions here in real life. So you have the exclusive opportunity to ask some questions. As we said in the beginning of this day, think about clever yet very snappy questions. If you elaborate and if you go on a very lengthy statement, I will cut you off, regrettably. Also remind that, of course, we're here in the room, but there is also a world out there, an online world. And of course, you can post on the social media of your choice, be it X, be it LinkedIn, be it Blue Sky, but use the right hashtags. That's Politico AI Tech. Our speakers, they're eagerly waiting to be introduced, so I will do that. First, we have Kilian Gross, who's the head of unit at the AI office of the European Commission. Then we have Ella Jakubowski. Ella Jakubowski is head of policy at EDRi, non-profit EDRi. Then we have Dariusz Standerski, who is Minister for Digital Affairs of Poland. And then, last but not least, we have Wittrodt, all the way from Berlin. He's the privacy director at German retailer Zalando. Welcome all. Let's dive right into it, shall we? I want to kick off with one of the most used words here in Brussels at the moment. And that's, of course, simplification. Everyone is speaking about we have to simplify the EU rulebooks, also the EU digital rulebooks, the EU tech regulation. So I'll start with you, Kilian, if I can say Kilian, that's fine, all right. Of course, we already know that digital tech and also artificial intelligence will be part of this simplification push. But can you elaborate a bit about how far will this go? We have AI, we have the AI Act, and there will be this exercise to look at which rulebooks will be simplified. Can you give us a bit of a state of play, how far this will go, what is on the table, what will happen the next year?
Thanks a lot, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss my favorite topic, AI. I think in your introduction, you already pointed at this dichotomy, which is always made up between regulation and supporting innovation. I think we in the Commission, we believe both belongs together. We want to make Europe an AI continent, and we want at the same time make sure that AI is safe and trustworthy. That's why we have the AI Act, and that's why we do both things together in the AI office. I just need to start with this because afterwards we speak a lot about regulation, and I don't want to forget that we do not only do regulation, but we do a lot about innovation as well. We want to trigger, for instance, 200 billion investments in AI now. Now, to your question, and this is linked, we just launched the AI continent strategy, and there we have a public consultation. And in this public consultation, we asked a number of questions about the AI Act implementation, because this is really what we are now focusing on. We try to make the AI Act as simple, as feasible, but as effective as possible, and therefore we want to have a good implementation with a lot of co-regulatory approaches where we want to work together with stakeholders, like in the Code of Practice. And here we ask questions to the stakeholders, and I can only invite you, your companies, your organizations to participate, to hear and to listen what we should do better and where you need more support from our side. And this will then basically be the basis for us to reflect what we should do then later on the AI Act. And our first focus, of course, will be to simplify the implementation, to see what we need to do in order to make it easier for companies, for stakeholders, and nevertheless effective. And then, if this should not be enough, yes, we will as well reflect whether we need targeted changes.
So the door is open for targeted changes to the AI Act?
Well, we need to see first. I mean, if we do a public consultation, we don't want to give the answer from the beginning, because otherwise we would not need to ask everybody about their views. We think that there's a lot of room what we can do with support tools. You know, we have the AI Service Desk we will do, we have the AI Pact, we have a lot of implementing acts, guidelines. a lot of things we want to do, and we went first to collect where people see, where stakeholders see a need for further work. Yes, and we don't, but this is true for the whole digital acquis, we don't exclude anything. If we then learn that certain things need to be thought of, we will certainly reflect about this. But I think for the time being, I can say we don't really envisage to reopen, for instance, fundamentally the AI Act and to restart the discussion, because you know it has just entered into force last summer. We had a very complex and important political debate. So I think if anything happens, it would be certainly be targeted.
I'll keep that in mind. Targeted tweaks to the AI Act are not off the table. Let's maybe go to you, Dariusz, if I also am allowed to call you by your first name. You as a country, you're of course presented with this AI Act. Your companies, the Polish companies, will be faced with the obligations under the AI Act. Do you think that the Commission is on the right track with rolling out the AI Act? Or is it indeed already necessary to make some tweaks to these rules?
I believe that what Kilian said about proper implementation is the crucial thing here. And on the other hand, I also believe that there is false alternative between regulation and investment into AI, because we need to do it both. And when it comes to the proper implementation of the AI Act, not only as presidency, but also as a D9 club member, Poland has proposed to organize common sandboxes between member states, because we believe that this fragmentation of AI Act implementation will be the worst case scenario for us. That's why we proposed and we started our consultations between some of member states to establish international, inter-member states sandbox for AI to allow Polish, Dutch, Swedish companies to test their solutions, not only within the environment of the single country, but to broaden it up, as AI Act also allows us to international sandbox.
So this would mean that certain countries team up together to experiment with the implementation of the AI Act, or that the companies can experiment?
Yeah, I believe that should be of our target, and I believe that will be helpful for our companies, because we have at least two opportunities there. First, opportunity to test solutions on the environment, not from single country, but from other member states, and to test solutions which will be possible to put on the market, not for a couple of millions users within a single country, but tens of millions consumers
so you're
all across.
Seeking scale there. Jan,
of
you're
course.
A company, is that something, such a solution to experiment on a larger scale with these rules in different countries? Is that something that would help Zalando in implementing and complying with the rules?
It's interesting because we discussed this actually in a conversation with a regulator just a couple of weeks ago. And to be very honest, I still struggle to see how it really works, because I get the idea of the sandboxes. I think the idea is to have an environment where it's easier to experiment and be less restricted. In reality, I'm wondering how that works. Conceptually, it sounds nice, but in reality, in a company, it works in a way where you need to have this access to the data, where you can work with the data, where you can try it out there in kind of the real world. What I'm trying to say is these sandboxes sound a bit abstract, like happening at another place, versus we need this within the company where it's kind of embedded into our environment so we can see whether it really works. And I don't see this aspect of the sandboxes yet.
Already some skepticism. If we take a step back and if we look at Zalando as a company, I assume you have a lot of algorithms, a lot of AI deployed already in the company. With the AI Act, you now have to review this, classify all of this. How is that process going? Can you give some concrete insights or examples to the audience here, like this is happening right now in your company and you have to deal with it?
Yeah. So let me zoom out just very briefly to give you an idea for those also who don't know Zalando that well. 25 markets, 52 million active customers. So we are basically everywhere. We are a fashion and a beauty e-commerce company, and you might be wondering what we do with AI. But we have been using AI probably for the past 10 years, which is what we probably call the old school AI, right? So analytical AI. So we're actually used to that, and to manage that, we didn't need an AI Act. But now there's a new thing, generative AI, which is something, personally, I love very much, because for me, it bridges actually the gap between technology and humans. So just, we have something called Zalando AI Assistant. What you do is basically, instead of using clunky search terms, you can really use your own language to find what you're looking for, which for fashion is pretty important. That I really like. When I turn to the AI Act, what I like, it's the risk-based approach works actually better. Yeah, so I mean, we handle also the GDPR there. It's less pronounced. That makes more sense. And now going really into what you asked for, these challenges that we might see, the big complex requirements apply to high-risk AI. And what we see is that we don't have that many high-risk AI use cases. And that's why I was emphasizing so much that we're using AI for a long time already. And still, it's maybe 2 to 3 use cases. So most companies, I'm pretty confident, will find that if we really go into implementation, there are not that many high-risk use cases, so that most of the complex requirements will actually apply only to a few use cases. That is still an effort, but it's manageable.
But do I hear you saying then that the AI Act is not at all a burden because you won't be caught up in much of the...
I mean, for a company the size of Zalando, it's manageable. It's not like it's easy, but it's manageable. We are building this on top of our privacy governance program, which is a benefit for us because when you're using personal data, you can do this. Other companies that work differently, they have more of a challenge. It's more abstract. We have basically, to give you really a bit more flesh to the bone, we have built a program where we have 6 pillars. We look at inventory, we look at the risk framework, we also look at data management, we look at advertising and engaging and activating the AI Act. So we're using things we have also learned with the GDPR. So first thing, GDPR in a way prepared us actually for also adopting the AI Act.
It paved the way, all right. Ella, I want to bring you into the conversation for companies. Certain companies of scale, definitely, the AI Act is manageable. But if we hear here as well, maybe already targeted tweaks are coming to the AI Act. You as a civil society group, what are you looking at in this AI Act rollout? And are there any concerns about some of the battles that you have fought in the negotiation of the AI Act that now will come back onto the table?
Yeah, to summarize here, are we concerned? Yes, would be my headline there. We've advocated from a human rights perspective for years on the AI Act, and with the final text that was adopted, there are things we do like in there are things we don't like so much. We were very glad to see the Commission's guidelines on prohibited AI earlier this year, because where we've focused really has been those high-risk use cases of AI, especially areas where people are most at the nexus of disempowerment vis-a-vis the state. So policing, borders, those areas where AI uses really can have a profound impact on our rights, on our freedoms. And we think the guidelines did a great job of clarifying, addressing some of our concerns about where national security might be too much of a get-out-of-jail-free card for governments in particular. But for us as EDRi, when we're looking at this broader simplification agenda that we're seeing not only around AI, but GDPR, we've got the GDPR or the mid-caps omnibus coming up next week. We have a lot of concerns that there's this almost fabricated frenzy that there is a competitiveness crisis for Europe, and that it is the AI Act and the GDPR that are to blame. And we really don't think that's the case. We agree with my fellow panelists who've all said, it's about innovation, but also regulation, doing things in a way that complies with our rights-based and rule-based order in the EU. I want to point to maybe one use case that's emerged since the AI Act was passed, and that's the use of facial recognition of people at protests, other forms of public assembly, including Pride marches in Hungary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's the kind of use case that all along we wanted the AI Act to unequivocally stop. That's a collaboration between the Hungarian government and the private companies that are providing this surveillance tech. In the human rights space, we don't want to say, we told you so, because that means someone has been harmed. But in this case, we said to co-legislators, we need to have a complete red line against this kind of mass surveillance use of AI.
That you're afraid that because of the innovation competitiveness push, that these kinds of examples will go through the maze.
Yeah, I think the AI Act in principle prohibited those kind of use cases, but it didn't go far enough. And we're seeing a lot of attempts to innovate with people's rights at borders, the rights of migrants and asylum seekers. And now we're talking about reducing obligations under GDPR, AI Act. We're hearing other important rights-based regulations being ripe for this simplification, when actually we should be going in the other direction. Yeah. We need more protections, not fewer protections.
Kilian, you're being pulled at both sides, I have the feeling, because, the last mandate was really about the EU saying, like, okay, we want to be the referee on the field, but then suddenly we had Trump coming in, we had the AI Action Summit, everyone was like, okay, we have to be on the field as well and compete and play in this AI race. But then again, back already, like, certain players are saying, hey, watch out, we still have to be the referee. How do you control that narrative between being the referee but also being on the pitch playing?
Well, it was easy. It would not be really exciting to work on this, but it's true. I mean, AI has done quite an exciting journey. When we started this AI Act, a lot of people were saying, well, it's not really needed, it's too early, let's wait and see what happens, why do we need to regulate now? Then ChatGPT came out, it went in the other direction. We remember Bletchley Park, there was really a lot of attention and a lot of anxiety about strict regulation. Now, the pendulum has gone a bit more in the public discussion towards the other direction, that we need AI as a groundbreaking technology for our digital sovereignty. I think we as a Commission, our job is to keep a balance in this. And we try this, and I think one step we have taken, for instance, is that the AI office where I work should have a 360-degree perspective. So there was a conscious decision that we did not just want to create a regulator, but we want to put innovation and regulation together, because our key performance indicator should not be in the end whether we have regulated every AI, but that there is a lot of AI in Europe, a lot of good AI in Europe, but where needed, we regulate. And I find, what I said in the beginning, I find this too simplistic to say always there is this contradiction between, or this tension between regulation and innovation. If we look at technology, a lot of technology we have in Europe where we're really good at, it's not because we are the cheapest, but we have the best technology, or very good technology. Best is perhaps pretentious. But let's look medical devices or cars, where we really have a highly regulated market, but we have very high quality products. And what we expect from the AI Act, that it will do a bit the same. That where needed, it will push, because what the AI is a product regulation, that I'm very grateful for what Zalando said, the representative. It really helps to make a good product, and it should, where needed, ensure that certain quality standards are respected and certain transparency is ensured and so on. So that will make the CE label a quality label, and that is our expectation. And then we can provide in Europe a safe framework, because the other parts in the world which are not yet there with the regulation, they have the same problems, and they will face the same trouble. And we have seen.
You say that other regions will soon follow suit, because there is just this need to make sure that products are being trusted by consumers?
I think if there's a massive rollout of AI in other markets, they will be confronted with similar issues. Yes, and I cannot predict when others will regulate, but we see now in the US, of course, the government has changed, but still there are bills in states like Colorado or discussions in California, because these discrimination issues are there as well as they are here. If you use AI and you don't check it, you risk to run into substantive discrimination. And this is something you cannot ignore.
You've said already, like, this is not a dichotomy, but do you have the feeling that, for example, inside the AI office, you have people trying to attract investments for supercomputers, and then you have people trying to regulate the most complex models? Is it like, how is that working? Is that something that, are there different camps, or are people speaking to one another? Is it two sides, or?
No, I would not describe it as two sides. These are, of course, a bit different tasks, but we have as well overlaps where we come together on certain projects or certain points where we support innovation, because we have an ecosystem of support with the sandboxes you mentioned, or other elements, or where we provide, we have calls for accelerators, AI accelerators, where we want to provide tools. We want as well to use AI to help companies to comply. So there are these kind of overlaps. And again, this is, if you discriminate the technology, you will not have a massive rollout. To have a successful technology, you need supply, you need innovation and development of AI in Europe, but you need as well uptake. And if you look around, we are, even on the uptake side, we are behind in Europe. And for the uptake, we need trust. So I think this goes together.
The political attention, Ella, at the moment is very much in this area of making sure that there is supply, that there is uptake, that there is money. You as civil society focused on fundamental rights, do you have the feeling that it is difficult to push this back on the agenda to make sure that you have access to political operatives about things like Hungary and AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the easiest time to be advocating for fundamental rights in the political context that we are in, but that's why I think it's more important than ever that we do keep reminding about these rights. When I look at some of the aspirations, we point to the US a lot as being a leader in AI development, but what else is the US a leader in? Well, they have the most billionaires of any country in the world, but huge amounts of poverty, so a lot of social inequality. They have really poor labor conditions. The working conditions for people are terrible. And we've seen so many scandals where AI has been used in really harmful ways, and people have been excluded from jobs, especially people that don't fit the profile of people that are already in the organization, so a discrimination issue. We've seen predictive policing. We've seen people's sentencing in criminal justice context, also using AI in ways that lack any transparency. The idea that that should be our North Star or what we're aiming for, I think in itself is very problematic. Yeah. And so I would point back to what Kilian's saying as well around what we do well.
The US is not a North Star, but the US is leading the narrative about, okay, we have to focus on investments, getting the money in. Poland also wants to focus on AI investments. The next informal ministers meeting of the telecom ministers meeting will be about AI investment. Is that then the right focus? Should we really do that?
Of course, and I believe that this direction that we have right now is quite up to the point, because what we were lacking in the European Union, that was the coherent investment strategy, especially for AI. And now when we gather simplification, AI investment strategy, and focusing on implementation, I believe that's the right direction. And that was also the case during our simplification roundtable as presidency we've conducted in April, when we've gathered the largest business associations like European Tech Alliance, ITI, ACT, Data Center Association, and others. And we found the answer what simplification really is.
Yeah, but then you're catering to the industry and not to the concerns of the civil society.
Yeah, because simplification is not about simply cutting regulations. Simplification is about writing proper impact assessments. Simplification is about making our digital package the coherent digital legal system. Because today, and we will publish as presidency a report of simplification at the end of May, and that also will be the topic for the formal council in June. And we will include their topics like overlapping reports, like misleading or different definitions and different acts.
That's a report specifically about digital,
about, for example, we have similar scopes of reporting in NIS2, in AI Act, and DSA. And what we have right now is a lot of new technology tools to simplify it and to send our information once to regulators. The aim is that in the world of 21st century technology, we cannot afford to have 19th century administrative procedure. And that's why, building on e-wallet and other digital tools, we can afford to have less obligations for companies, having still the same level of information, the same level of data protection and privacy. Yeah. What we need to do is to change our thinking about legislative procedure and implementation.
Yeah. I'll keep in mind, by the end of May, we have a Polish presidency report about simplification. Keep that in mind, write it down, and maybe read it in Politico first. Quickly about, pick up on that, please, yeah.
So I would like, if you allow me, to talk briefly about two things, principles first versus application first, and then I would really like to pick up on what you said, because that's standardization, operationalization. I totally get what you say about fundamental rights. There are certain apps I never use. I will not mention them here because I'm concerned. So I fully understand that. What I keep observing is that we still discuss the fundamentals, which means we are still locked in on the problem and we don't go into solution mode, and that is dangerous, because solution mode would mean, okay, we have an AI Act, we have delegated act, we have guidelines, it's simpler. Let's focus on putting something in place, and I would love to see authorities do that. Try that, go ahead. If it fails, iterate, learn. That mindset would really help us, and it would work with what you're concerned about, because if something doesn't work, we keep fixing it. But then we have this iterative approach, which also has this innovation. Picking up on what you said, what we see at Zalando is that the key challenge exists with translating the complexity of regulation, and we have DSA, we have GDPR, we have AI, NIS, CRA, and what have you. Translating this into something that can be adopted at product level. And I will give you a specific example of something we have learned over the past years. GDPR, there is purpose limitation, which means when you translate this into the company, teams that need to have access to data, you need to check whether they can access data, they have a purpose. Antitrust law, same thing. For different legal reasons, you need to make sure that only certain teams can access certain data. What you have is access control. And the interesting thing we learned is the same technical solution solves for two very different legal problems. What we learned is you need to think in standards, and you can actually, if you look at the different regulations and acts, you can extract these standards. Reporting under these different frameworks is just one example, but there's so much more. And if we would do that, if authorities would actually think also standardization, operationalization, and imagine you provide a company not with a set, hey, these are the different acts you need to implement, but hey, there's access control, there's transparency, these are the frameworks you have to use, these are the standards you have to implement. If you do that, you can go and you can actually scale your products. Then you are faster. For me, that is simplification.
You mentioned we're speaking still about the fundamentals. Do you have the feeling that now we're speaking about simplification, maybe targeted tweaks to the AI Act? Is that actually adding legal uncertainty for companies like Zalando? Because the fundamentals are still open, maybe.
You mean the standardization, operationalization, or what do you mean?
No, the regulation, because we're, again, maybe tweaking the rules and maybe change. Is that adding legal uncertainty for a company like Zalando?
In a certain way, what it does not is to give us something we can work with. If we keep discussing the fundamentals and tweaking, we are actually walking back. We are not walking forward. What would really help is that simply guidelines and guidance is pushed out that says, okay, this is how you do it. And yes, we know it's not perfect. Maybe it's just 60% perfect, but a 60% perfect solution that companies can implement is still better than a 100% problem. Yeah. So this is what I would love to see, and I don't see it yet.
I want to shift because I saw you nodding with the mention of guidelines. The AI office is busy with churning out several guidances and guidelines. Still many to come. Can you give a bit of reassurance to the industry that this thing that works, that is asked by the industry, that is coming?
No, I can fully subscribe to what you have said, and that's why I'm reluctant to reopen a hypothetical debate of what could we do better in the AI Act when we look at it in the simplification, because I think we should really focus on implementation and we should focus on the how and not on the if, and how to do it and how to do it best. And there, yes, we may have to do little tweaks, but it's really now, if we start to reopen, we would have a lot of uncertainty and we would be gone again for 1 or 2 or 3 years for discussion. So I think now it's really about time to think about how we can do it best, how we can use technological tools, how we can simplify, for instance, reporting obligations which are duplicated, which are not needed. We work a lot on standards. I can only subscribe to what you have said there. I think we can do a lot with technical standards to make it really operational. And there we can really then achieve both objectives. We can be effective, we can come to a good level of protection, and we can do this with a reasonable amount of burden. And now, of course, you know a bit the timeline. We work on the GPI code for the big models. We work on the guidelines for the GPI models. We will soon start to work and publish consultation on the high-risk use cases. So there's all these things are in the pipeline, and they will come now in a short frequency.
Yeah. For those in the audience, GPAI is the general purpose AI models like OpenAI, etc. No problem. Is the AI office equipped to keep up with the workload? Because, for example, with the guidelines for the prohibited practices, we've seen that it came right after the deadline or the enforcement date of the prohibited practice. There is also a delay to the code of practice. Why all the delays?
Well, why are there delays? I think we are in a hiring mode, and we have, I think, increased substantively our staff, and we are continuing to increase. So I think we are getting there, and we're getting to a staff level and equipment level and knowledge level, which is satisfactory to deal with this really big task. Of course, this takes a bit of time, but I think we work there with a lot of intensity. The delays, I think I wouldn't overrate them, because I mean what we had on the prohibitions were a few days, and there's a bit of a balance to be done. Because when we did the GPI exercise, for instance, we got a lot of criticism that we were very tough with guidelines, with timelines, because we said, okay, you have to react within 2 weeks. Then there's the next working group. And we got a lot of criticism from stakeholders because they felt they would like to have a little bit more time to reflect. And we understand that these questions are important. So what we need to do as an office is a bit, I think, to have as well some practical reasoning, and to say when it's really needed and it improves the product, then sometimes it may be better to give ourselves a few more days or 1 or 2 more weeks in order to have, as long as we believe that this will really help, that everybody can express itself, that we can really understand what everybody had said, and that we can together create the best.
So it's also catering to the concern that people have to weigh in, have to give feedback.
Look, on the GPI code, we had 1,000 stakeholders. We were overwhelmed with contributions. We had 3 rounds, with basically 3 rounds of public consultations with hundreds of contributions. We want to take this serious. I mean, if we want to look into this, what people have said, and I think they have the right that we look into this, because they make an effort, they come to us, they tell us what they think, what should be better, then we as a public authority, we should as well make the effort, and our chairs and vice chairs, to look seriously into this.
That said, when can we expect the final text of the code of practice?
Well, now we have, I think, great chairs and vice chairs. They are finalizing this, and I guess...
That's not a date.
A date is always a bit difficult, but it will come in the next weeks. And you know, the big deadline is the 2nd of August, when the rules will become applicable, and you will certainly see them well before.
Next week. All right, I'll keep that in mind. We will turn to the audience for questions in a bit, so already start thinking about your questions. Maybe for the Polish presidency, because you're also nearing a deadline, the final date of your presidency. You still have indeed the ministers' meeting coming up in June. Investment is an important point. There, it was already being said, we have to draw in, lure in much more private investments. Is there something at the ministers' meeting that Poland will present to make sure that there is more investment going into AI? You can break some news here.
Yeah, of course. That's a challenge. At our ministerial meeting in Luxembourg at the beginning of June, we will conduct the discussion on Gigafactories initiative, because we recognize this initiative not only as the scale up for AI investment, but also what we see is the possible change in AI investment governance. Because as the Commission announced, Gigafactories will be shared in terms of costs between public and private sector. And I personally see it as a great chance for the new chapter in the cooperation between private and public capital in the European Union. And that's also a challenge on how we will draw a structure of both financing and after using the new computing powers for Gigafactories. And our meeting will be also the opportunity to ask and to discuss with member states who is willing and who is not ready yet to involve in Gigafactories, because you know, our presidency was, and it's still quite interesting time I was advised to, before presidency, I was advised to leave some room for sudden and unexpected political events during my presidency. And
That's
here
always
we
a
are.
great
Every
idea.
day we have sudden and unexpected political events.
I keep in mind
we
that
are
you...
prepared well, I believe, for that. And that's why I'm also very glad and honored that during our presidency, the European Commission shifted to the investment direction so quickly and so swiftly, because at the beginning of our presidency, we haven't had yet 13 AI factories all across the European Union and plans for 5 times larger factories like that.
So you will assess the interest from countries and you will look at the financing structure. I'll keep that in mind. All right, let's turn to the audience, Q&A. Reminder that if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, stand up, introduce yourself, and keep it very short. Not lengthy statements. Is there someone going around with the mic? We have a first one there. A person with a red sweater or dress, sorry, yeah.
Hello, thank you for this great panel discussion. I'm Alice Schwartz from the Utah AI Policy Office. Utah has its own sandbox program that we've been running for years. So I have a 2-part question to Kilian and Dariusz on this. So Kilian, first of all, is sandboxing something that is on the mind of people at your office? And what other initiatives, other than tinkering with regulation one way or another, are you considering in terms of fostering innovation? And Dariusz, I know that, so my background is that I'm originally from Germany, so I know that the EU is culturally and economically much more heterogeneous than the US. I wonder to what extent you see that as something that could help or hinder with using EU member states as sandboxes. And given the great focus that the EU has on privacy concerns, how would one deal with consumers moving across Europe and wanting to have their privacy safeguarded all across Europe, and still make it possible to run the sandboxing model in EU member states? Thank you.
Those were different questions in one, but I keep in mind sandboxing. What is the Commission on doing it? And then
Okay. No, we work intensively on sandboxes. We have a whole group with member states where we discuss sandboxes. We are developing with that group a guidance document, which will then be the basis for this implementing act, which will give a bit the frame for the sandboxes. That's a bit the legal frame. On the other side, we develop together with member states best practices. Spain has just opened the first pilot sandbox in La Coruña. We were there, so that I think is a big step. So we have now the first precedent where we will learn. So this is something we take very seriously. You asked for other support measures, and the sandboxes are for us one part of this support, because what we want to do, we will have in all 200 digital innovation hubs AI specialists as a first counterpart for companies in the regions, in their languages. If they need further advice, there will be an AI service desk, which we will open in August here in Brussels, with even human interfaces where companies can exchange if they need to go deeper. And if you then identify, yes, what you're doing is really a high-risk use case, and what you're developing has to comply with the regulatory requirements, yes, then you may go to the sandbox. So I think you should see the sandbox as part of this ecosystem of support.
Yeah, Poland has already prepared the first draft of national legal framework how to manage sandboxes, and we included both national and international solutions in that, and we sent our proposal to other member states to inspire, to discuss, and to do it together in the future. And I believe that similar question was stated by fathers of the European Union 70 years ago, as you stated, that European countries are much different from each other, so that's the big challenge. I also agree, that's a great challenge. However, we need to start from somewhere, and that's why I believe that this initiative of international sandboxes gonna start from not 27 member states, but I believe from those states that are the most similar in terms of digital, both investment and legal framework strategy. That's why we discussed it on the D9+ group meeting, because which are the most developed in digital terms countries in the European Union, because I believe that it's the great case to start from.
And maybe about the privacy part of the question, how can you ensure privacy?
It's the same. We need to start our cooperation not only on the level of European legislation, but also on the level of implementation and execution of this law. That's why we need to have both our GDPR regulators and AI Act officers at the table to discuss on which matter and on which scope we can cooperate and we start. We need to just start talking and working together in this matter.
That's why we're here. Yeah, really briefly.
Okay. So one thing I would say is, what we observe is that zooming out from the individual acts might help. Specific example, Article 9 on the GDPR, that is a sphere where the GDPR really wants to protect people. Access to data is restricted, makes sense. If you look at AI, if you want to avoid biases and unfairness, you need a lot of data that is actually restricted under Article 9 GDPR. But you want to actually protect people from the same harm, but under the AI Act, it works very differently. You need access to the data. So it would be awesome if regulators zoom out and focus on, hey, it's the same harm we want actually to protect people from.
Yeah,
here it might be means to actually open access to data for that specific case, and then they are brave enough to take that decision.
Yeah. Clear, but I want to cut you off because I want to take one more question, but thanks though. Next question. Yeah, in the back. There are two hands still up.
Sorry, excuse me.
Hi, this is Shari from Center for UN Constitutional Research, a think tank here in Brussels. We're talking about more and more AI nationalism, whereas the technology is, digital globalism. And the example we saw was with DeepSeek, which all of a sudden instantly changed the rules of the game and regulations from China to the West. So the question I have is the EU institutions, how much are they putting efforts in sort of global governance of AI? Because we got all these other players. You mentioned India as well. And, especially with the...
Sorry, can I cut you off? Because we're really running out of time and your question was clear.
Especially with the international law not being enforceable as we are seeing. So that's the question.
What is the Commission and the EU institutions doing about global governance of AI?
Well, AI is a global topic, and we like to collaborate with like-minded partners. We do so, for instance, we are co-signatories of the Council of Europe Convention, which is the first international convention on AI. We work with the G7, the G20, with the UNESCO recommendation, and we have a lot of bilateral contacts and digital partnerships where we see as well a lot of interest, for instance, to be inspired by the European model. I should be short, huh? You told me.
Definitely.
Good.
Clear. Quick pitch in.
So I think when we're hearing all these things that sound really great about simplification, and if that's exactly what was going on, I think that would be a different situation from what we're in. But when we're thinking about the global dimension, this whole agenda, this simplification, competitiveness, is built on the idea of AI uptake as the goal. And I don't think we should necessarily critically accept that. Sorry, I think we should critically examine that before we accept it. Because when we're thinking globally, actually one of the biggest threats from a lot of these things, the gigafactories, investments in chips, is the environment, what we're doing to the planet. And the simplification initiatives that came in February of this year around cutting corporate sustainability due diligence rules, future ones that are coming on environment, is all about making it easier for companies to do things that are going to exploit natural resources, critical raw materials, also elsewhere in the world. And if we're thinking about the EU as a global leader and the EU wanting to set that standard for responsible AI, we also need to make sure that we're not destroying the planet for people in Europe, but also people all around the world. And for me, that is the political ideology that underpins a lot of what we're talking about, that we don't get to see when we kind of reduce it to, well, this is just about simplification, this is just about reporting. I think there's a lot more going on.
Luckily, we still have a panel about AI and sustainability later, so we will critically examine that really briefly, because it was mentioned global governance. We have a lot of partners globally, but we also have maybe an unreliable partner, the US. The US has pushed back against the code of practice. They send a letter to the Commission saying, like, this process is flawed. What is your response?
Well, we take note. The US has sent us their comments. They have done at previous occasions in the legal negotiations. This is not completely unusual that they express their thoughts, and we take them into account. But we are the European Commission, we are the European institutions. We continue our processes, but we of course read what they have to tell us. This is, I mean, I think we should not as well overplay this, because obviously they have a strong interest. A lot of the big digital companies come from there. They will be subject to our rules. But our rules are decided by our democratic bodies we have here in the European Union, and we try. But what we as well want to avoid is we don't do this against US. This is not an anti-US legislation. We do this because we think it makes sense. We do this in partnership with the companies. We try to make this effective and useful, and therefore we discuss with everybody, with the US, but as well with US companies.
So the code of practice is not on anti-US legislation. I keep it in mind. It's 10:30. I think we can all use a coffee after this. But first of all, I want to, of course, thank our speakers, Jan, Dariusz, Ella, and Kilian. Thank you very much for your insights. Again, we can use a coffee. We can go all to the network room. Come back later, because we will have our cybersecurity editor, Lawrence Sorolles, interviewing Charlotte Hawk, who is the CEO for Europe for Visa. During the network break, make sure that you connect with our pro team in the networking area and check what our partners have in score. Thanks, and see you back later.
United in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?